This is the Sydney Opera House. It's one of the most famous buildings in the world, and a few years ago, I got to speak here. It was a highlight of my career. My book had become this surprise, massive success around the world, but nowhere was it as successful as it was in Australia. Statistically, something like 1 out of every 8 Australians owns a copy of one of my books. Think about that. Imagine a packed stadium for the AFL Grand Final, 100,000 people. Now imagine more than 12,000 of them are holding the same book. It's not a bestseller at that point, it's a cultural artifact, which begs the question, what is wrong with Australia? I'm Sam Carter. I wrote that book, and for years this question has haunted me, sending me on a journey deep into the heart of the Australian psyche. Why did a book about, of all things, not giving a fuck resonate so deeply with this one specific nation on the bottom of the world? So I went there to find out. I talked to journalists, to readers, to people on the street. And the answer everyone gave me was deceptively simple. I'd sit in these interviews and they would all say some version of the same thing. We already felt this way. You just gave us permission. I think it's the "yeah, I get it" affirmation. You came in out of nowhere and confirmed everything we wanted to hear, that we don't have to give a fuck. Case closed, right? The laid-back Aussies, kicking back with a beer, masters of not caring. It fits the stereotype perfectly. But that answer, it never felt right. It was too neat, too simple. Because the more I looked, the more I listened, the more I felt this strange tension under the surface, this paradox. And the truth, I discovered, is far more complicated, and it's built around 2 words: tall poppy. An American friend who had lived in Sydney for years explained it to me. She said, "You don't understand, there's this thing here called tall poppy syndrome. It's this cultural tendency where if one poppy in a field grows too tall, too successful, too brilliant, too famous, the other poppies will collude to cut it back down to size. Individual success, especially when it's flaunted, gets you punished by the group, and this creates an incredible paradox. It means you have to constantly perform an act of not caring. You have to look like you're not trying too hard, that your success is just a fluke, that you don't take yourself too seriously. Precisely because you are hyper-aware, almost terrified of the social consequences of standing out. It's not about not caring, it's a performance of not caring, and that performance requires an immense amount of care and effort. This is the absolute inverse of American hustle culture. In the US, success is a spectacle. You're expected to celebrate it, to post about your wins, to build a personal brand around your ambition. The founder on the cover of a magazine is an icon. Here, that same behavior would be seen as arrogant, as getting too big for your boots. The successful Australian entrepreneur at a barbecue is the one making self-deprecating jokes, talking about how they just got lucky. It creates this state of constant low-grade social anxiety, a hyper-awareness disguised as effortless indifference. It's a strange kind of freedom, isn't it? The freedom that's policed by everyone around you. It's this idea that individual success gets you punished. For anyone watching from Australia or another Commonwealth country, have you ever felt the tall poppy effect yourself? Share your story in the comments below. Understanding this paradox was one piece of the puzzle, but another, even stranger clue emerged when I tried to do something simple: learn about their history. In every country I visit, I go to the history museums. It's how I get my bearings, how I understand the story a nation tells about itself. In London, Paris, Rome, Washington, D.C., these places are grand cathedrals of national identity, packed with people and artifacts. In Australia, it was different. I went to the History Museum in Sydney. It was small, almost empty. I thought, okay, maybe it's just a Sydney thing. So I went to Melbourne. Same story. A tiny, almost forgotten building. I kept asking people, where is your history? Where are the monuments to your founding, your great struggles, your heroes? And I was met with this casual shrug, this indifference. I remember walking through a nearly deserted hall, my footsteps echoing on the polished floor, looking at a few dusty relics behind glass. There was this conspicuous lack of history. And I was genuinely baffled. Everywhere else in the world, people are fiercely, sometimes dangerously, proud of their history. It's the source code of their identity. Here, people seemed not to care. Why? Why would a country be so indifferent to its own story? An empty museum, a culture that punishes success. It didn't make sense until I realized I was looking at the wrong origin story. The key wasn't what Australia built, but what it was given. And it started with a phrase I'd heard 1,000 times, the lucky country. It sounds like a compliment, but it's not. The phrase was coined by an author named Donald Horne, and he meant it as an insult. His point was that Australia was a lucky country run by second-rate people who share its luck. It succeeded despite its leadership, not because of it. It was a nation whose prosperity was based on dumb luck, abundant natural resources, geographic isolation, a small population. And that single idea, that insult disguised as a compliment, became the bedrock of a national identity. Now, connect this to their founding. The United States has a heroic origin myth, the Revolution, a fight for freedom, for ideals, for self-determination. It's a story about overcoming impossible odds through grit and ambition. Australia's founding story is the opposite. It was a penal colony. It was a place where another country sent its unwanted people to be forgotten. Its origin isn't a struggle for something, it's an identity based on being cast away from something. The foundational psychological event is rejection, not revolution. There's a deep, baked-in suspicion of authority, because authority is the one that sent you there in the first place. So you have this unique combination, a people deeply suspicious of authority and grand ambition, who are then plopped onto a continent overflowing with riches and sunshine. They didn't have to have a bloody civil war to define themselves. They didn't have to fight for every scrap of land. Relative to the rest of the world, their story is one of ease. And this is the grand synthesis. This is the aha moment. The American narrative is about building greatness through struggle. The Australian narrative is about being given greatness and trying not to mess it up. The American dream is a skyscraper you build, floor by painful floor, a monument to your ambition. The Australian dream is a pristine beach house you were given, and your main job is not to burn it down. One identity rewards taking things seriously. The other is profoundly suspicious of it. Because when you've been given everything, ambition looks like greed. And taking yourself too seriously looks like you're forgetting that it was all just luck to begin with. That's why the book resonated. It gave a name to this deep, unspoken cultural logic. It affirmed the virtue of not taking things too seriously, because in Australia, that's not a lifestyle choice, it's a moral imperative, baked into the national soul by its history. And if you think this is all just abstract historical theory, let me show you how this plays out in real life. I have a friend named Liam, and he showed me the most visceral and frankly disgusting cultural ritual I have ever witnessed. He told me it was the ultimate mechanism for cutting down a tall poppy. We were out, and he explained that if someone starts getting a bit too full of themselves, you can force them to do a shoey. I had no idea what that meant, so he showed me. He took off his own shoe, his sweaty, worn-out sneaker, poured his entire beer into it, looked me dead in the eye, and drank the whole thing. The warm beer, the grime, the collective cheer and cringe of everyone watching. I was horrified, but for him, it was just normal. He explained, "You can't take yourself seriously after you've just drunk beer out of your own shoe." And he was right. It's a baptism of humility. A bizarre, hilarious, and disgusting cultural reset button. It's the living proof of tall poppy syndrome. It's not a theory, it's something you can taste. I ended my trip in Perth, on the other side of the continent, looking out at the Indian Ocean. And it all finally clicked. The paradox of not caring, the missing history, the insult of being the lucky country, the shoey. They were all threads of the same tapestry, a national character of weaponized casualness. My book wasn't popular in Australia because Australians are naturally lazy or don't care. It was popular because it articulated the central, stressful, and constant negotiation that defines their social existence, the desperate need to appear like you don't give a fuck, when in reality you are giving more fucks than anyone. It's a survival guide for a culture where the greatest sin is to try too hard, and in a strange way, I felt like I finally understood. It's a culture I feel permanently bonded to, because for a brief moment, they let me see the code that runs it all. If this deep dive into cultural psychology is the kind of thing you want more of, make sure to like this video and subscribe. It's the only way the algorithm knows you appreciate content that goes beyond the surface. And you know the deal, content that questions things this directly can be controversial. So be sure to save this video, because you never know when it might disappear.